Shalom to the elect of Israel, to the hopeful elect of Israel, you Hebrew Israelites, you so-called Negroes, Latinos, Native Americans, West Indian, and Haitians. Gotta give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, the Most High, the Heavenly Father. His Hebrew name is Yahweh, not Yahweh, not Jehovah, not God, not Elohim, not Most High, not Lord, not Yah, not Jah, not Ahaya, not Allah. It's Yahweh. His only begotten Son name in the Hebrew is Yahweh Shai. Not Yahshua, not Yeshua, not Jesus Christos, not Jesus Christ, not Serapis Christus, not Yeshaya, not Yehoshua. It's Yahweh Shai. So God give all praise, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rikak Kodash. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone who rule well, who teach well, who are the apostles and elders over all of Israel. And a sincere salutation to all the Akim pushing this truth and believing this truth throughout the four ends of the earth, the entire world, waking up the hopeful elect. And shalom to the Akwaf who are listening and learning, the Akwathim who are listening and learning, the few sisters who are listening and learning. I'm Isaiah from the GMS Orlando camp coming into another lesson in true facts, faith, and edification, another daily edification. Lord's willing is be edifying. And this is a lesson that I did live, but the video, the speaker was kind of loud, so I'm redoing it. Lord willing is be edifying. I'm going to play it, and I'm going to get a couple of precepts. If you watch the live screen, you see the precepts I brought out. But he's going into the economy, the economic system, the infrastructure of Babylon the Great, North America is collapsing. It's done. So Lord willing is be edifying.
Professor Wolf.
Hi.
It's always nice to see you. How are you?
Well, you know, I'm watching everything. I'm trying not to get depressed. I hope I can keep a decent chin up, and you're helping me do that.
And you see, I started out, I paused and said, you see, hey, he said he trying not to be depressed, man. Watching everything that's going on, okay? And the scripture tell you in Ecclesiastes 12:3, man, when the keepers of the house shall tremble, okay? He's an economist, man. So he's one of the watchers. He's one of the keepers of the houses, man, if you can understand. And he's trembling, man. Why? Because they know that Babylon the Great is finished, man.
Well, don't worry about it. We don't have to be happy here. We'll just focus on the absurdity of it all. Okay, let's just get right into it because I know you're very busy and you're in high demand these days. If you're just joining us, Professor Wolf is a Marxian economist well known for his work on economic methodology and class analysis. He hosts what I'm sure you should be watching every moment that it comes out, the second that it comes out, Economic Update. It's syndicated on 70 radio stations or more, probably by now, nationwide, and you can watch it on Free Speech TV, but also...
And I was telling you, man, I always watch Ron Paul, Peter Schiff, Gerald Celente, Richard Wolff, okay? These guys are economists, man, and they know what's going on. They know what's happening, man.
You can become a part of their Patreon community. There's a lot going on. Professor Wolf, you have a new book coming out. When does it drop?
It becomes available on the 15th, so it's literally less than a week away.
Talk about, before we get into food scarcity, which is what we're going to talk about today as well, talk about the new book and what got you to this. It's The Sickness is the System, right? And you're talking about how coronavirus and the system of capitalism have intersected. Can you talk about your book and how did you write it so fast is the question. The question I have.
Well, I am very pleased and proud to say that the message I'm trying to get out seems to have caught hold. And over the recent last 3 or 4 years, my schedule is overwhelming. I can't do all the things that I'm asked to do, which is a wonderful problem to have. I don't want to discourage anyone, but it makes scheduling kind of difficult. One of the biggest issues that has come up is what you just asked about. What is the relationship between this awful viral pandemic and the collapse of our economy? And to make a long story short, my conclusion, which is why we titled the book the way it is, was the following: that the real sickness we have to worry about isn't the virus. I mean, we have to, of course, worry about the virus and protect one another from it. But the ultimate sickness is our economic system. That's what we have to change. Had we changed it, had we had a different system, we might have been able to show a very different response to this pandemic. You made the point a few minutes ago on your program how different the Italian situation is from the American. They had a worse initial shock of the pandemic, but they've been able to overcome it. I recently spoke to one of the people in our team who lives in Rome, and she can go to a cafe and she can do all kinds of things that we can't do here, and she is able to see week by week improvement that we can't see here unless you believe the president, and luckily fewer and fewer people do. So anyway, we wanted to show and underscore the point, so we called the book, the title, The Sickness is the System, to get people to begin to understand that yes, viruses are part of the human condition. It's part of nature. It's been bothering human beings for as long as there's been human beings. The trick is not to defeat the virus, because even if when we do, another one is coming and we know it. The trick is to have in place a system that will anticipate it, prepare for it, and contain it using the best we know how to do, rather than the United States and its capitalist system, which is, as people love to say, and it's correct. The United States has barely 4.5% of the world's population, and we have 25% of the world's COVID cases and 25% of the world's COVID deaths. For a rich country to be that ineffective compared to the rest of the world tells you something, namely that the sickness is the system and not the virus.
Professor Wolf, part of the oops, we got a little bit of an echo here. Let's see if we can fix that. Part of the reason I'm always thrilled when you come on, but part of the reason that I wanted you to come on is because there are a lot of economists on the YouTubes right now. I'm assuming they're all economists. I haven't checked, you've got like YouTube economists predicting, disaster. Some people on YouTube are calling what happened here a plandemic, as in it was planned. This is all the way on one side of the spectrum, and then others are saying we were just not prepared, and the Trump administration is using a Naomi Klein shock doctrine-esque type of response to get everything that it wants, which we saw if you watch the news segment. They're trying to now privatize schools, do away with, everything that we just reported on in the news, all take your Medicare, everything. They just want they're just using it as the right wing, a way to get to their goals. What are your thoughts about this?
Well, I think, first of all, whenever there's a catastrophe, two things you can be sure are going to happen. Number one, the different political sides of whatever the current political struggle is will try to make use of it, to use it, to interpret it, to understand it from their own perspective and given their own goals. And the other thing you can be sure of is that there will be the usual conspiracy theorists. They will come up with a scapegoat, somebody they can blame who fits their universe, or how they think about the world. The president is doing, in his inimitable way, by referring to this as the China flu, or the Chinese, or a plot by the Chinese to affect us. It is grotesque. If you talk to any epidemiologist, except for the 2 or 3 that the Trump administration can either find or buy to say otherwise, but if you pay attention to the literature, you'll know that it really doesn't matter. Let me give you an example where it starts. Up until this one, the most horrible recent virus was the one in 1918, right after the end of World War I. It killed, by the way, 700,000 Americans, a very serious pandemic. Where did that virus start? We know it started in an army camp of the United States Army in Kansas. So, had the world then been like Mr. Trump is now, it would have been called the American virus. It wasn't. It was given a completely different name, the Spanish flu. Why? It didn't start in Spain. Here's the answer. Spain was the only country with a sufficiently free press at that time to actually talk about the virus. In every other country, the government, still half in World War I, clamped down and didn't want anyone to know about this terrible thing since we had all gone through World War I together. Look at the irony. A Spanish flu that wasn't Spanish, an American flu, which is where it started, which wasn't called that, and now an American government which does not want the people to understand its failure to prepare for or to contain the virus. It gets away with that by finding a scapegoat in China. It's no more valid than the scapegoat of immigration to handle the economic collapse earlier this year. It's part of what people do, sadly, when there are catastrophes and they can't face up to the way their own system didn't manage it.
What do you think will be the most surprising part to people in the book that you are writing, or that's coming out in a few days? So get it.
Well, I think the point that will be left for most people is that we are seeing in this pandemic something which cannot be evaded anymore, which is that our economic system is not just sick, it is in a process of decline. It's been going on for a long time. It's been hidden. You know, we covered over the decline of the working class starting in the 1970s in this country by loading that working class up with debt. Somehow you could imagine you could get through these declining decades by loading up with borrowed money to keep consuming what your wages would no longer pay for. That's over. That bubble collapsed in the crash of 2008. Then the corporations went on a borrowing spree, and the government did, and now it's exhausted. The book's message is Americans, particularly my fellow citizens, as a person born and lived all my life in the United States, we are in a declining system, and the people at the top are grabbing everything they can before the ship goes down. And for the vast majority of us, we've got to face that's what we have, so that while there's still time, to do something to salvage our situation so we don't, as a mass population, go down. And let me be clear about what that means.
Now you see, he said the ones at the top are grabbing everything they can grab before the system go down. Why? Because they know that they have but a short time. This is Job 14:5. It reads, seeing his days are determined, the number of his months are with thee, that has appointed his bounds that he cannot pass. So they know. So they're grabbing everything they can grab before the ship sink.
We're Americans. We've been watching television for decades, in which we see from time to time images of third world countries, we used to call them, in Asia, Africa, Latin America, tiny enclaves of rich cities surrounded by vast populations of desperately poor. That's where we're going in this country now.
And I said that the other day when I did a lesson, is God mad with us? Because that's what my manager asked me one day, Saturday, when I went to the plantation. He asked me straight up, is God mad with us? Hey, and I told him, did you know North America has become a third world country? That's facts, man.
Unless we change the system, we're becoming what we used to see on TV. The rich getting wildly richer, crazy richer, kind of obscenely richer. Look, Jeffrey Bezos, not to pick him out, but why not, gets an extra $30 billion over the last 6 months at the same time that over 50 million Americans have to file for unemployment. I mean, you could not write a play with that kind of a scene without the critics saying you've gone overboard. But that's our reality. And the only interesting thing is how long it's taking for people to get it. The book is intended to help clarify this situation.
And we thank you so much for your work on that. What of the middle class? When we talk about the rich getting richer and the poor getting poorer, where do the middle class?
There is no middle class.
Where does
you
the
either
middle
on the
class come out?
top or you on the bottom.
Well, you've answered your own question.
Facts.
It isn't there anymore. It is disappearing on a scale that nobody was prepared for. That's part of why we have Trump and all the other bizarre kinds of politics that you comment on, and rightly so. It's people are desperate. They're freaked out because the promise, which I call the promise of 20th century capitalism, that it would be a kind of capitalism that would create and sustain a middle class, a part of the working class that earned enough money to have what you could call the American dream, or a comfortable life, or the ability to give their kids a college education. All those things, they're all disappearing one way or another, directly, indirectly. All of that is disappearing. This is the first generation of people who can't go to college without loading up on a level of debt they can never repay. What are you doing? What is happening in this country? This happens at the same time that other capitalist countries, you don't even have to go to another system. Take Germany, all higher education, all free. It's not just free for German citizens. The Germans have made it free for anybody. An American can go to Germany, get a higher education, a college degree, no tuition, no fees. Yeah, you have to pay for your room and board, but that you would have had to pay for anyway. So your education is free. What is happening is that the American capitalist system is broken and it is declining. And either we change this system and thereby save ourselves, or it will take us down with it.
This is Isaiah. You heard what he said. The system is broken. This is Isaiah 24 in verse 10. It reads, "The city of confusion is broken down. Every house is shut up that no man may cometh in. There is a crying for wine in the streets. All joy is darkened. The mirth of the land is gone. And the city is left desolation, and the gate is smeared with destruction." The city of confusion, which is Babylon. That's what Babel mean. Babylon mean confusion. The city of confusion is broken down. Every house is shut up that no man may come in, man.
Well, again, on the internet and all over the place, we're reading about extreme conditions. There are people preparing for global food shortages by, I don't want to call it hoarding. Some people call it hoarding. Some people call it prepping. Some people call it just saving a few things just in case so they don't starve to death, and the internet is encouraging people to look into the future and realize that everything they've come to depend on, including the way food is delivered to them, the way it gets from the farm to their table, is now being called into question. And as China faces its first corn shortfall in years, food prices are rising around the world. People are asking, is food insecurity the latest of the 2020 plagues? What are your thoughts on what is happening in China and food insecurity?
Okay, the first question is there's, of course, a rational basis here. People are quite right. The world is falling apart. All the ways that people say that to one another and feel it and see it, they have a grain of truth. That wouldn't be happening if there weren't something going on. I think what's going on is the collapse of an economic system, of capitalism. Let's remember, every economic system in the history of the world has the following pattern. It's born, it evolves and changes over time, and then it dies. Just like you and me. We're born, we evolve over our lives, and then we pass away.
That's Job 24 and 23. I'm finna read it. This is Job 24 and 23. Though it be given him to be in safety, whereon he resteth, yet his eyes are upon their ways. Yahweh Shemawashah eyes is upon the ways of these wicked rulers. These Job 9:24s. Verse 24. They are exalted for a little while, but are gone and brought low. They are taken out of the way as all other what? Kingdoms, kings, rulerships, dominions, and cut off as the tops of the ears of corn. You see, this is that Psalms 64 and 7. It reads, but power shall shoot at them with an arrow, suddenly shall they be wounded, so they shall make their own tongue to fall upon themselves. All that see them shall flee away. And that's why I tell you in Isaiah the 13th chapter that the Arabians shall neither pitch tent here, man. Because everybody fleeing from these devils because they seeing what's going on, man. They seeing how they spilling the beans on each other, man. Okay, because there is a division amongst the UN, amongst Babylon the Great and all his allies, man.
Economic systems are exactly the same. Capitalism is no different. Capitalism, we know, was born 17th century in England. It spread all over the world. It has evolved over time.
You heard what he said? In England, man. Which is who? The Rothschilds, man. Okay, Maya Amsho Bauer, man.
Which means its next stage is passing away. It's not a question of whether, it's really only a question of when and how. I think that's what's going on.
Itself, that's how.
Hey, cause they days are already determined, man. They cannot pass their time.
Their own internal contradictions and problems in the end consume them. Just like the processes of our own bodies will in the end make us pass on, in any case. So people are worried and they're looking around and they're frightened. And they should be. That's rational. That's reasonable. It's when it comes to the diagnosis as to what's wrong that we get a little strange. So far, the chain of food production and food delivery has worked reasonably well. Given the failures everywhere else, it could have been much worse. Is that a guarantee that it won't get worse? No. Is it possible that it could become an interrupted food system? The answer is yes, because not only do you have the pandemic doing all kinds of damage to the people, to the farms, to the shipping mechanisms, but you have the political fallout of a dying system. And let me give you some examples. The trade war and the tariff war imposed by Mr. Trump, desperate to slow the decline in America by finding a scapegoat in China and acting out to disrupt all of the relationships that have been built up over the years between the United States and China, which include financing and shipping food. I mean, this is very important. Now, this morning's Financial Times carries a story that the American companies in China are completely disregarding Mr. Trump, are closely working with the Chinese. It's a wonderful story about the difference between blubbering in Washington and the reality on the ground. But I don't want to assure anyone of something I can't assure you of. I will tell you this, that the single most important reason that the Communist Party of China became the government, won the civil war in China in 1949, was because of the skill that that party showed in dealing with the food problems of China. It's literally built in to the DNA of that political communist party, because China had always produced enough food. The problem in China over decades, over centuries, was not producing food, but getting food from the place where it was produced to the place where people needed to eat it. The transportation system, broadly the economic system, was what wasn't working. And the Chinese Communist Party said that, organized in those parts of the country the kinds of distribution system that would mean that where food was grown, it could be gotten to the people who need it. My guess is the minute they show up with shortages, their history will make them kick into gear really quickly because that's how they became the people in charge in that country. And my guess is they're not going to let that problem undo them. They're attuned to that more than you would see in most other countries.
I've noticed some of the reading I was doing was about how China is going into they're buying more corn, for example, from the United States than they ever have, possibly, to mitigate against their own loss of crops due to climate change and also due to circumstances surrounding the coronavirus, whether they be delivery or inability to work or inability to tend or any of that stuff. Are we going to be seeing that here?
Yeah, I think if I could add to your point, there's also a political motive, and there's no reason to not put it on the table. The Chinese reacted to the tariffs imposed on them by President Trump, among other ways, by stopping the buying of soybeans. They wanted to underscore that if the United States is going to initiate a trade war against China, then China will have no choice but to retaliate. Tit for tat, the usual kind of games that politicians play. So they stopped buying soybeans, which had a very serious effect on the soybean market, particularly here in the United States. They bought soybeans, for example, from Brazil, creating a very close relationship between China and Brazil as they depend on each other in the way that used to describe the U.S. and China. I think the Chinese now are buying corn in part to drive home that point. If the Chinese buy American corn, it is the best news corn farmers could imagine, since the Chinese are the biggest country on earth, the biggest importer of food on earth, and it tells you that the corn producers have a future if we have good relations with China, versus the soybean farmers who discovered we will not have a good future for them because of the political games Mr. Trump feels the need to play in the process of scapegoating China.
And why has he been playing these games? Because North America has been the bully on the schoolyard over all the other nations. Because this is the harlot that sits on the scarlet-colored beast. Through their prophecy, Salakia, through their policies, their legislation, their democracy, their philosophy, their draconian laws, they can do these things, man. Why? Because the Lord say, until the time, matter of fact, this is Isaiah 10:1. Woe unto them that decree unrighteous decrees and that right grievousness which they have prescribed. Okay, who's doing this? Esau, Edom. This is Psalms 94:20. It reads, shall the throne of iniquity have fellowship with thee, which frame of mischief by a law? So these nations, they are separated from North America. That's what the Brexit deal was about. But they are still under the laws and the policies and the legislations that's through the UN, man. But the Lord said this, Revelation 17:17. For power have put in their hearts to fulfill his will and to agree and give their kingdom to the beast until the words of power shall be fulfilled. So they separated, as it tell you in Daniel 2:43, they shall mingle with the seeds of men, but they will not cleave one to another, but they still join to them. So for the moment, they got to agree, but they are separated. That's what Obadiah 1:7 was about. Okay? This is Obadiah 1:7. See, these nations is pissed off of North America, man. This is Obadiah 1:7. It reads, all the men of thy confederacy have brought thee even to the border. The men that were at peace with thee have deceived thee and prevailed against thee. They that eat thy bread have laid a wound under thee. There is no understanding in him. It said they that were at peace with thee have deceived thee. Why? Because they got to give, they made agreement to give their kingdom to the beast until the words of the Lord be fulfilled. Okay, this is Yahweh Ba'ashim Hawashah moving these chess pieces strategically, man. Okay, that's why this is happening like this. And they have to just fall in line Because this is the Lord. When you read Proverbs 21:1, it said the king's heart is in the hand of the Lord, man. So this is the Lord moving these pieces like this.
Those are the realities. What happens now? Well, look, that depends a lot on the political decisions made in China on the one hand, but in the United States in the upcoming election and so on. If the response of the United States continues to be what it has been, it's a kind of go it alone. We don't need the rest of the world. We will punish you if you don't do what we want. We will cut off our relationships. It's kind of America alone. And let me tell you, with a declining economy and a world in which other parts of the world are not declining, they have their problems. But capitalism is on the ascendancy in terms.
And that's why I say in Revelation 17:16, and the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast, these shall hate the whore, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. Like you just heard him say, North America is a one-man bandstand, man. They don't care about the other nations, man. They for self. Why? Because of their pride, man. Obadiah 1:3. The pride of thy heart have deceived thee, man. That's why these devils is the way they are today, man. And I see them how to do a part 2 on this, Lord's willing.
In terms of output, of growth in places like China and India and Brazil, and the United States going it alone, that was not smart back in the last century as a strategy, which is why we abandoned it. But to go backwards now and to try it now at a time when the rest of the world is in much better shape to withstand that, that is a self-destructive decision, which I think Mr. Trump and the Republicans will come to regret, with or without the disruption of our food system, which could be a victim along the way.
Could you paint the picture of what intergovernmental cooperation looks like if we do happen to get away from this capitalist system that is crushing everyone?
Well, it's the same thing that we've done here in the United States, just on a global scale. You know, we don't make each state in the 50 states of the United States be self-sufficient, be on its own. I mean, we don't take it seriously. We have some kooky politicians who will say, oh, let's all here in Texas or let's all here in California, secede. And you have a little of that. You have it in Alaska. But it's not serious, and it has never caught on in any systemic way. What we have is a division of labor.
Now, you see, he just said what we have is a division of labor, man. This is Luke chapter 11, verse 17. But he knoweth their thoughts and said unto them, every kingdom divided against itself is brought to desolation, and a house divided against a house falleth. This is Mark chapter 3 and verse 23. It reads, and he called them unto him and said unto them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? And if a kingdom be divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house be divided against itself, that house cannot stand. And if Satan rise up against himself and be divided, he cannot stand but have an end. And what we see in North America is separating itself, man. Okay, California being the richest state, it's separated from all the other nations, from all the other states, man. Then you got, okay, California and New York, the richest states. Then you got Florida and Atlanta and Chicago. These states are separate from all the other states, man. So this is these devils separated amongst themselves. This is Isaiah 19:2. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians. This talking about the Edomites against the Edomites. And all the heathen nations that fall in between them, it's all a separation. And I will set the Egyptians against the Egyptians, and they shall fight everyone against his brother, and everyone against his neighbor, city against city, and kingdom against kingdom. And the spirit of Egypt shall fail in the midst thereof, and I will destroy the counsel thereof. And that's what we see going on. The Lord is destroying the counsel of these nations, man. Starting with North America, Babylon the Great.
Goods are produced in Nebraska that are shipped to New Jersey. Other goods are produced in Arizona that are shipped to Alabama. We work that out. We hopefully take advantage of where the resources are, where the people are, what the transportation mechanisms are. We take into account the different seasons, and we end up believing, that's our history as a country, that we are better off working it out that way than having every state compete with every state. I mean, it's a little bit irrational to do it the other way, and we would end up being as divided, as tense, as troubled as other parts of the world. Europe is an example. Africa is an example. Divided up into too many, much too small economies that can't sustain standards of living the way they could if they worked more closely together.
That's facts. This is Luke 12:51. Suppose ye that I am come to give peace on earth, I tell you nay, but rather division, man. The Lord got these nations in division, man.
So my answer is we should be doing that on a global scale. We have avoided wars between Texas and Georgia, or between Wyoming and West Virginia, right? We don't have wars. We have a division of labor. That's what we want on a global scale. So what we need is cooperation, work things out. Don't allow one part of the country to become extremely wealthy and another part extremely poor.
And these Edomites, they've been fighting amongst themselves since they came over here, the conquistadors and the Spaniards, man. Okay, that's what you had them civil wars about with Spanish, French, and the British, man. They was fighting amongst themselves, man. Okay, about colonizing North America, man. These devils have been fighting amongst themselves since forever, man. Okay, that's what they've been doing, man. The Spanish, the French, and the British been fighting amongst each other, man, for the longest. I'm gonna have to do a part 2 to this.